Let's talk more about this with James Esseks. He's the director of the American Civil Liberties Union, Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender and HIV Project. He's joining me live now from New York. So thank you so much for being with us. I just want to get your reaction when you first read this bill.
Well, it's so great to be with you. Look, religious freedom is a core American value. It's protected by the Constitution, and it's a part of what makes America America. But at the same time, religious freedom doesn't give anybody the ability or the right to discriminate against other people. And what's happened in this new law in Mississippi is that Mississippi has gone out of its way to authorize discrimination against LGBT people in this country, but also against people who have sex outside of heterosexual marriage, which I wager is a lot of people in the United States.
So, James, I just want to play devil's advocate for 1 second and get you to react to what the governor of Mississippi said. Just if we could just play that soundbite.
We emotionally react in today's society. In the first news story, someone says, well, that must be what the bill says. There's no intent. There's no one on the part of the Mississippi legislature or the governor's office that wants to discriminate or harm anyone. This is simply, if they are worried about protecting people's rights, also understand that people of faith have rights. So you have to balance. The scales of justice have to be equal on both sides.
So you just heard him there saying there is absolutely no intention to discriminate. Your reaction to that?
So I think that doesn't accord with the record in the legislature in Mississippi, but also he says we have to balance. But the courts have already gotten this balance right. The courts have said repeatedly that religious freedom is absolutely, as I said earlier, a core value, but discrimination violates American principles of equality as well. And you know, look, if I run a business in Mississippi or anywhere else in the U.S., when I open my doors to everybody. You got to let everybody in, and it doesn't make any difference what your religious beliefs are, because the value of equality is so important to who we are as Americans.
So I just want to explain something to our international audience, and you can weigh in as well. So in 1964, the Supreme Court ruled that discrimination was illegal, but the gay community, the LGBT community, are still not a protected class. Just explain that to our international audience.
Well, sure. So we have civil rights laws in this country that say the discrimination in employment or housing or in the way businesses are conducted is unlawful if it's done based on race or sex or national origin or religion at the federal level. We're still struggling to get express protection in federal law for sexual orientation and gender identity for LGBT people. At the same time, the U.S. Constitution already makes clear that government should not be discriminating based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And one of the things that's striking here in both North Carolina and in this new law in Mississippi is that here we have government affirmatively authorizing discrimination, and in North Carolina we have the law that requires arms of government, public school districts, to discriminate against transgender Americans.
And I want to walk our viewers through what exactly this law entails. This bill would actually allow religious organizations, here we have it, to deny marriage, wedding services, employment, rent or sale of property, medical treatment to members of the LGBT community. It sort of, as a black woman myself, it sort of reminds me of how black people, how African Americans were discriminated against in this country 50 years ago. Well,
certainly, look, there's a history in this country of official required mandatory discrimination by the government based on race. And I think race is a separate category. What's striking here is that in the U.S., the bans, the requirements for official discrimination against LGBT people, certainly against lesbian, gay, and bisexual people, have largely but not completely been erased. And that the most recent time that we got rid of official required discrimination by the government was last June, when the U.S. Supreme Court said that same-sex couples have the freedom to marry all across the country. And here what we see is states imposing new requirements of discrimination. And look, the trajectory on this issue, that is LGBT rights in America, is towards greater equality. And what's really just amazing to see here is that in North Carolina and in Mississippi, We have state legislatures and governors who have decided to go against that trend and instead to embrace the idea of mandatory discrimination.
Right, so
that's not where we're headed.
It's a step backwards. Okay, James Esseks, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for a fascinating discussion. Appreciate that.